Hey guys, Dantix here, back with another Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate guide. Chaos Gate is an unbelievably satisfying turn-based strategy RPG with a rich amount of customization. A big part of that is the characters you can create and wield on the battlefield against the demons of the Plague Lord Nurgle. If you're just starting out, I highly recommend checking out my tips video below. But if you want to know more about the types of Grey Knights, the incorruptible, ultra-elite demon-fighting badasses you can outfit to purge your enemies from the battlefield, you're in the right place. In this video, I'll be running through each class, what they can do, how you can build them, what items you should look for, and the general ranking of effectiveness. Let's begin. So there are 8 classes of Grey Knights in Chaos Gate, with 4 only becoming unlocked a little into the campaign. The 4 you start with are the Justicar, the Interceptor, the Purgator, and the Apothecary. Later on, you'll have access to the Paladin, the Chaplain, the Librarian, and the Purifier. Just because these are advanced classes doesn't mean they're better, they just offer different playstyles. Now keep in mind, with the right items, any class can fill any role, however some do it better than others. Let's start with the Justicar. The Justicar is your frontline support class. His abilities mostly lean towards keeping your other knights protected or buffed. He can be upgraded to use Terminator armor, which makes him more survivable on the battlefield in exchange for the ability to climb over obstacles. Damage-wise, he can be upgraded to equip a Psy Cannon, and you can boost his melee and Hammerhead ability. You can also invest in Rend the Unclean, which deals damage in an AoE around you and pushes back enemies, so he won't be completely useless on the battlefield. The Justicar can't teleport, but can charge into battle instead, stunning targets along the way. He can also force targets to attack him with Provoke, or upgrade it to compel targets to attack each other. On paper, these abilities sound good, but if you fall in love with the Justicar, it'll be for this ability, Honor the Chapter. When fully upgraded, it can give another knight 4 action points and 1 willpower. That's insanely strong if you have a powerful DPS character like a fully stocked Interceptor or a ranged Purgator. Keep in mind, the standard amount of action points is 3 per character, so one of your characters will be able to play around with 7 actions. Your Justicar will still have 2 action points after casting this as well, so it's not like you're transferring your actions over. If you choose to run a Justicar on your team, there's little excuse not to invest in the leadership discipline. The Justicar can also buff his Aegis ability and transfer over his armor to a target, so you can make one knight extremely powerful. Along with Honor the Chapter, this lends itself well to a fast and hard-hitting Interceptor to charge the front lines with reckless abandon. In terms of items, there are multiple ways you could build the Justicar. I prefer to double down on using his willpower-based Honor the Chapter ability. So picking up a power armor like Warp Scorn, which doesn't increase warp surges when using psychic abilities and also increases your max willpower, is good, or Morning Plate, which lets you spend HP instead of willpower when it runs out, so you can keep boosting your knights. War gear wise, I prefer using a grenade as they always come in handy, but you can use a Sacred Incense for more willpower or double down on the support with a Medical Servo Skull. The Justicar is a B tier of class. Good, but only amazing when you build a team that appreciates its level of support. Next is the Interceptor, which is quite possibly my favorite class, and I highly recommend at least one of these on your squad. The Interceptor is your melee DPS class. His abilities all lean towards getting in and dishing out the pain. The Interceptor does get the ability to equip a silencer ranged weapon, but ignore this node. You want to lean into what he does best, teleporting around and causing chaos. The Interceptor has 2 kinds of teleports. The first lets him choose a spot at 20 range, and Teleport Strike lets him choose multiple targets to teleport strike to at 15 range. If this doesn't sound broken to you yet, check this out.
We slay the darkness.
Trust me, it feels broken. Teleporting doesn't trigger your enemy's auto abilities like Overwatch, and on top of this, there's a 50% chance to regain an action point, therefore making this crazy movement free. Movement in Chaos Gate is very important, as getting into the ideal positions is the difference between killing or wasting turns and taking damage. It's so broken that your other knights will feel like they can never get into the right position after you start using teleport efficiently. So after beelining for the teleport related abilities, you want to get his melee discipline. It will increase your crit chance and crit damage, as well as making it so when you crit, you have a 50% chance to regenerate an action point. So you can see how this class will be able to reap chaos in multiple ways. It's not uncommon for a kitted out interceptor to take out whole waves of enemies solo, not to mention that melee enemies that can usually parry your knights can't parry the interceptor as its starting ability. In terms of items, you want to double down on the crit chance and damage. I'm using the Weeping Blade, which gives a natural 30% crit chance, which on top of the other buffs is around 75% chance to crit at all times. However, it also gives a 40% extra crit chance when they force strike, making force strikes a guaranteed crit and also a guaranteed free action. So as long as I have willpower remaining, I can continue to melee enemies in range until they're all dead. On top of that, it has a +5 to crit damage, making it do more than double my normal damage. Nothing else really matters, so I give him mobility. The Fate's Refuge granting 2 extra movement speed, making it so I can always get in range per melee strike and also run through fire and poison without worrying. Just to double down on crits, the Augurium Scroll gives 15% more. I think I pronounced that incorrectly, but whatever. Though, as this is overkill, you may opt for a Libra for crit damage instead. The only drawback is the Interceptor isn't as survivable as some other classes, though that usually doesn't matter as everything will be dead. I don't need to say more, the Interceptor is an S tier class. Next is the Purgator, which is your ranged DPS option. This is one of the more customizable options and is dependent on how you want him to function. Abilities wise, you can focus more on the Psy Cannon, the Silencer, or the Incinerator. The Psy Cannon is a powerful medium ranged weapon, can deal large area of effect damage, and can overwatch. The Silencer has more range, can disable targets, but can't overwatch. The Incinerator is short range, high damage, wide coned, and can purge. You can opt to increase your ranged weapons ammo and buff up the Silencer, making it so it ignores partial cover, has increased range and crit damage. You won't regret investing in grenades though, as with the right gear, they do a ton of AoE damage. With these upgrades, instead of carrying 1 grenade, you'll carry 6 total over 2 different kinds. But I really have to show you how powerful they are. Then we have the Astral Aim ability, which lets us precision target limbs at range when critting. So with crit investment, you can disable or kill key targets. It can't be understated how valuable this can be against powerful opponents. You can also invest in the Psy Cannon or give your Purgator psychic abilities to make opponents vulnerable or blind plus purge them. These are good but situational. Really, you're on the Purgator for damage, so when it comes to gear, it's really up to you. I chose a Silencer that completely ignores armor, then stacked range crit and crit damage gear. This turned him into a very effective boss or tank killer. That being said, it could be a good mob killer with a grenade or Psy Cannon investment. It's a very flexible class. Its only downside is its lack of movement or survivability. The Purgator is great on most teams and is an A tier class. Next up we have the Apothecary, your support class. They're the only class that can equip the Narthekium? I don't know. Which is basically a giant needle with a chainsaw on it that they use to heal your knights or damage their enemies. Yeah, you just jab your knight with a giant needle. They can also be upgraded to equip Terminator armor, so yes, they're your healer. You can double down on this and buff the amount healed, as well as focus on Servo Skull equipment, which can do things from harvest seeds from enemies, to damage, to heal, to taunting enemies. They can also guarantee collect bloom seeds from targets with a melee attack, but after your knights get their criticals high enough, this won't be needed. On the left side of the tree is the Apothecary's Biomancy skills, 3 of them which give one knight you're in melee range with some buffs. All 3 of them together aren't as strong as the single buff your Justicar can give a knight, and he can do it at any range. You know where I'm going with this. So in a perfect situation, you can run to your Interceptor, buff him with extra movement, more stun in melee and more resistance for free action points, then fight your enemies, though this rarely does much in practice. With the Servo Skull unlock, you can equip a special skull to apply Biomancy abilities at range, but then you're using an item slot to enhance your basic abilities that probably should have been ranged to begin with and are now limited use. The Apothecary also gets 2 psychic abilities, one makes a large area bleed, the other stops enemy movement. Both are quite strong in practice, but in a lot of cases you wish you could have just done damage instead with the grenade. Gear-wise, the Apothecary wants support items and willpower. I'm really not going to dive too deeply into this because even on the highest difficulty where purging and healing were more important, this class didn't feel that strong, and I much rather avoiding damage as taking hits was very costly on that difficulty. Therefore, once again, the Justicar was more useful with an armor transfer and a taunt. It can work well with the right build. For example, an Affliction focus can make problems for your enemies, but the Apothecary will be your first class you replace. It's firmly in the C tier. The next class is the Paladin, who can only equip Terminator armor, but is the only class that has access to the Storm Shield item, which replaces their ranged weapon with some more tank and the ability to overwatch an area in melee. If someone comes in, you go in for a melee attack. The Paladin has mostly a mix of support, melee, and psychic abilities, a jack of all trades but master of none. For example, his Smite ability, though useful, is not as strong as the Librarian's version. Emperor's Will gives a knight willpower and can be charged to transfer all of the paladins over to the target, making him a good support for a librarian or an interceptor who wants to keep the chain going. Most of the time their willpower will be supported by their own gear and abilities though. Damage wise, he can be upgraded to equip a Psi Cannon, but then you'll be foregoing your Storm Shield. You can upgrade your melee's damage, knockback, and even upgrade your Defend and Area ability, which is your melee overwatch. Finally, he gets Fury of the Ancients, which is a cone spread attack which does high damage and knockback, possibly the most fun paladin ability. In terms of items, it depends highly on what you plan on doing. If you're running a paladin, you might as well use a unique item, the Storm Shield, in which case it may be better for you to focus on tanking, although all their abilities scream for more willpower. At this point though, you have to ask yourself, why not use a more dedicated willpower using class, or a better DPS class, or a better support? The issue is that there's no way for this class to get in position, and Fury of the Ancients and their melee knockback demands positioning as well. Ironically, this support class needs a lot of support to be good. With the right support though, like the Librarian's group teleporting, the Paladin can be fun. This is sadly another C tier class. Next we have the Chaplain, who is another tanky support class. He can only equip the Terminator armor, but is the only class that can equip the melee Crozius Arcanum weapons, which cause vulnerability on targets. I hope I pronounced that right, I'm gonna get so much flack in the comments. The Chaplain shares some abilities with other classes we've already gone through. He can provoke targets just like the Justicar, and he can transfer willpower to a target just like the Paladin. However, the Chaplain is about litanies. Litanies once on will stay on the whole fight, but can be turned off to turn another on. Think Paladin auras in Diablo 2. You can only have one active at a time, and which you choose will drastically change based on your team's needs. For example, one gives ranged attacks a 35% crit chance increase. Now imagine pairing this with the Purgator build we just talked about. They'll essentially be able to fire forever until reloading and movement become a necessity. Then Litany of Hate works well with a character that likes to stun, as when an enemy is stunned, you can execute them. And this litany gives bonus action points when you do so, which will keep your whole team fighting. Then we have the Invocation of Focus, which makes it so your focused attacks, be it from range, melee, or psychic abilities, have a chance to give back 1 willpower, making those essentially free. Words of Power gives all your knights 3 extra crit damage, so if your characters already have high crit chance, this could drastically increase your output. Then there's a litany to up your squad's resistances, and another to increase the amount of armor the Aegis Shield gives. As you can really only have one active at a time, invest in 2 maximum and focus on this knight's other abilities like Provoke. In terms of gear, you want to find a strong mace. It's nice to have someone on your team to apply the vulnerable status to enemies. You also want to find armor that increases your affliction chance or focus ability chance depending on your build. I opted to increase health with his equipment, but grenades and healing might be more your route depending on your needs. This one is really up in the air. The Chaplain is very dependent on your squad. If you have 3 ranged attackers, for example, he can provide a lot of benefit. If you're built heavily into stun or crit, he can help as well. Overall, the Chaplain has more to add than the Justicar, but the Justicar's Honor the Chapter ability still makes it so if you have to choose between these both, it will be a hard choice. Therefore, the Chaplain also sits in the B tier. Next we have the Librarian, and this is your mage class. The Librarian starts with a much higher willpower than other classes and can only equip the Terminator armor, so don't think squishy mage, this is a Grey Knight after all. In fact, the Librarian has many abilities to make him more tanky, from automatically gaining an Aegis shield at the end of the round, which works well with the ability to transfer armor to targets, the same ability as the Justicar. The Librarian can also focus on the basic range weapon, the Storm Bolter, which is nice because no other class really does. However, why you're really on the Librarian is for psychic abilities. First and foremost, they get the ability to teleport, but unlike the Interceptor, it can be overcharged to teleport the whole team. I already ranted about positioning, so you know this is an ability you absolutely need to get. There's also a natural 50% chance to get an action point back when they teleport, making it a good way to start a fight. I should also note that any items or abilities that increase auto chance increase the chance of these kinds of abilities proccing, or any kind of ability that has auto in the title. Like the Paladin, the Librarian has the Smite ability, though his is a global range and ignores any cover and armor, so quite a bit better. This is a great ability to pick off enemies out of reach of other knights. Then the Librarian gets a Psychic Shriek ability, which looks bad on paper, but it increases enemy stun meter by a huge 6, as well as disrupt them in a large AoE. 6 is like being attacked with a normal weapon 6 times. Combine this with a Chaplain with the Litany that buffs executions, and then build a strong melee interceptor to wait around the battlefield executing everything. The Librarian can also lower the current Warp Surge amount by 50% or charge to reduce it by 100% with Empyrean Domination. This can also be useful as surges can be quite annoying in the later stages of the game. However, your big ticket ability is Vortex of Doom. It does a huge amount of damage in a large AoE, as well as disabling ranged weapon attacks on mechanical targets. There are a surprisingly high amount of ranged mechanical targets. I want to say all of them, but I'm sure there's one melee one I can't quite think of right now. This ability also doesn't care about cover, and unlike grenades, doesn't damage your own knights. In terms of items, it's preferable to get a warding staff, as the chances of getting an Aegis shield at the end of the turn is great for a class that doesn't use their melee in the first place. At least your weapon could provide you with a benefit. Now, your armor is fairly cut and dry. You want to be looking out for the Warp Scourge, Warp Scorn, or any armor that has the Warp Suppression ability on it. You'll be using a lot of willpower and will be raising the bloom like crazy, so to mitigate that, pop your Librarian in this armor. Now you can cast with impunity. My first playthrough I used an Extractor Servo Skull as the war gear slot, but you can really equip anything. The Librarian is amazing and you definitely want one on your team unless you have a very focused, cohesive team in mind. This makes it in the A tier of knights, only not hitting the S tier because it doesn't quite win on its own like the Interceptor. Last but not least is the Purifier. This is another ranged DPS class, however it can be built to function more like a melee class. This is another that can't equip Terminator armor, but you want the maneuverability anyway. They can equip the same weapons as the Purgator, but they have a larger focus on the Incinerator, the flamethrower weapon. Though don't feel you need to use this, as they also have the same grenade abilities as the Purgator as well. However, they not only get the 2 extra ammo for each slot and the 1 area, they also get 2 extra damage for them, making Purifiers the superior grenade users when comparing in a vacuum. However, they don't have the silencer or the Psy Cannon focus the Purgator has. They do have Astral Aim, however, if you plan on not using an Incinerator. They also have a few melee abilities that purge targets and set them ablaze. Also, the more abilities the Purifier uses, the more damage bonuses stack up with their ability, Soul Blaze. So the Purifier can really benefit from a Justicar granting them action points if gone down this path. The Purifier takes no damage from hazards and has many abilities that increase resistances. Also, with the Cleansing Flame ability, they can both purge enemies of their positive mutations and set them on fire permanently. Yes, the Purifier's flames are a permanent debuff with investment. Then we have the Incinerator focus, which increases its range, which is very useful considering it's a cone attack, its arc size, and its damage. Also, if the Purifier kills 3 enemies in one shot, they get back their action point, encouraging good positioning and plays. The Incinerator can be charged to do a Flame of Purity attack, and that can be buffed to add damage, a knockback, and a blind. For gear, you want to pick which range weapon suits your build. If you want to nade your enemies, any range is fine. Maybe go with the silencer so you can be a sniper and a grenader. If you want to be a more in-your-face purifier, then get a strong melee weapon and use the Storm Bolter ranged, as the incinerator is a two-handed weapon and won't be able to be equipped alongside a melee weapon. I had Power Armor Heart of the Flame equipped, which increases the amount of grenades you can use, extending the range and increasing the damage. Then obviously you want the most powerful grenades you can find. Just like the Purgator, the Purifier can fit any role in any team. It provides powerful abilities but lacks the ranged options of the Purgator. In exchange, he has more survivability and power up close. It firmly sits in the A tier. So there we have it. The S tier has the Lone Interceptor, powerful on any team and a crime not to bring with you. The Purgator, Librarian and the Purifier sit in the A tier, very powerful in most situations and you wouldn't be disappointed having them tag along. Then we have the Justicar and the Chaplain in the B tier, great supports but not right for every team. They're there to help, but putting both together would be ill-advised. Finally, we have the Apothecary and the Paladin in the C tier. These are very situational picks, you either love them or hate them. Now, I should mention that the Champion Edition has the character Castilian Garion Crow with his own unique weapon and tree, but I don't consider him a class, rather a unique hero that not everyone will have access to. Play him if you want to experience something different. So, thanks for watching. What class stands out most for you? What kind of team are you going to build? Let me know below. For everything RPG, you're in the right place. Ciao, friends.